Baba Vanga's shocking nation-sinking prophecy finally makes sense. They say prophecy only makes sense when it's too late. But Baba Vanga, known by many as the blind seer of the Balkans, once spoke of a nation that would vanish not through war nor disease, but through something far more chilling: quiet. No alarms, no sirens, no time to flee, just absence. A nation erased in a single moment, as if the earth itself had chosen to forget it. For years, her warning was shrugged off, wrapped in metaphor and mystery. But now, as waters rise and world tensions stir beneath the surface, what she said begins to sound less like poetry and more like a countdown. She once said, "The world will forget one flag because the earth will no longer hold it." At the time, it felt too symbolic. Today, it feels like a headline waiting to happen. What if this wasn't just a vague prediction, but a specific warning? What if one country is standing on the edge of an ancient reckoning and we're only now starting to see the signs? In this episode of The Journey of Wisdom, we step beyond speculation and into the patterns the world has been ignoring. Before we begin, remember, once you see the connections, you may never look at a world map or your place in it the same way again. Make sure to like, subscribe, and stay with us. Because by the end of this video, you'll be left asking yourself, was this a prophecy or a forgotten truth finally revealing itself? Number 1. The Prophecy, Clarified. For years, Baba Vanga's haunting words were brushed aside as cryptic, even fantastical, yet her prophecy about a vanishing nation has begun to echo more clearly in the ears of scientists, geologists, and concerned citizens alike. She said, "It will be a place where water comes from the ground, not from the sky. The ground will eat its people, and the map will be redrawn overnight. No enemy, no warning, just silence." These phrases, once seen as obscure, are now strikingly aligned with the subtle and silent forces shaping our modern world, forces that don't come with fire or fury, but with quiet, invisible shifts that devastate just the same. Unlike the storms we brace for or the wars we fear, this vision speaks of a slower, more insidious unraveling, one that happens beneath us, not above. Baba Vanga wasn't describing a battle or a flood. She was capturing the essence of something far more disturbing: the silent, natural betrayal of the earth itself, where the safety we take for granted gives way without fanfare. Her line about water coming from the ground may sound poetic, but it's deeply rooted in real, scientific threats: subterranean water pressure, land subsidence, and soil liquefaction phenomena, where the land loses its ability to support the structures above it. It doesn't crumble with a bang. It gives way like a sigh, quietly and catastrophically. These events often occur in places we least expect: coastal cities built on reclaimed land, densely populated areas sitting on fragile deltas, or shipping hubs that serve as lifelines to global economies. When Vanga referred to the mouth that feeds ships, it's hard not to imagine a vital port city perhaps already sinking under the weight of its ambition, vanishing in a way that redefines maps overnight. What makes her prophecy especially chilling isn't just the imagery, it's the tone. No enemy, no warning, just silence. That silence is perhaps the most terrifying part. It's not just the stillness before a storm, but the silence of ignorance, of missed signs, of warnings buried under the noise of daily life. She once said, "Laughter is louder than the tremor beneath them," and that line stings with truth in a world constantly distracted. Experts warn us about sea level rise, about seismic risks, about unsustainable development. But those warnings are often lost in the rush of headlines, deadlines, and the illusion of normalcy. We've seen glimpses of this already: cities slowly sinking, coastlines retreating, and strange fluctuations in tides that hint at deeper troubles. Still, the world goes on, largely indifferent, choosing not to hear the subtle groaning of the earth below. Perhaps most disturbingly, she spoke of a time that will taste like salt, though no tears are shed. Salt, almost certainly, is the sea encroaching silently, and the absence of tears, that suggests a loss so abrupt, so disorienting, that the world doesn't know how to mourn it, or worse, it refuses to. As we now sit at the intersection of environmental neglect and natural consequence, Baba Vanga's eerie vision no longer feels like mysticism. It feels like a warning crafted in metaphor, urgently pushing us to pay attention, not to panic, but to wake up. In the end, whether or not you believe in her gift isn't what matters. What matters is that her words are lining up with the truth we can see, measure, and feel. And the real question, the only one that remains, is this: are we ready to hear the silence before the fall, or will we keep laughing, louder than the tremor beneath our feet? Number 2. Contemporary geological and scientific signals. Now, building on Baba Vanga's chilling vision of a nation swallowed in silence, let's turn to the present-day signs that are beginning to line up with her words more than ever before. Across the world, especially in coastal regions, experts are observing something both subtle and deeply concerning. The very ground beneath our cities is sinking. Subsidence, the gradual lowering of the Earth's surface, is no longer a rare geological oddity. It's happening in real time, in places where millions of people live. At the same time, groundwater pressure is rising, causing the soil to weaken and, in some cases, become unstable. You might be wondering, what does that really mean for us? Well, think about the buildings, roads, and homes you see every day. Many of them rely on firm, dry soil to stay upright. But when too much water creeps in from below, the soil can lose its grip, leading to what scientists call coastal liquefaction, a condition where the land can suddenly turn to sludge, just as Baba Vanga described. Water from below, leading to destruction without warning. And here's the thing, it's not just theory anymore. Around the world, from Asia to Europe to the Americas, new data is pointing to troubling shifts underground. Undersea volcanic activity is increasing in unexpected areas. Fault lines that have been quiet for decades are showing subtle signs of movement. Coastal sediments, soft layers of earth that once felt stable, are beginning to behave in unpredictable ways. According to recent engineering reports, all of these factors can combine in a cascading failure. One problem leads to another. Subsidence weakens infrastructure, which makes flooding worse, which then sets off liquefaction, and just like that, you're no longer dealing with a slow-moving risk, but a sudden collapse. It's quiet, fast, and hard to stop. Doesn't that sound eerily close to the silent disaster Baba Vanga warned about? Now let's look closer at where these risks are taking shape. Jakarta, Indonesia, is one of the fastest sinking cities in the world, with some neighborhoods dropping by more than 10 centimeters a year. Over in Japan, major coastal cities sit just miles from some of the planet's most powerful subduction zones, making them extremely vulnerable to ground failure. The Netherlands, a country held back from the sea by a delicate system of levees and pumps, is also seeing signs of stress from rising groundwater and land subsidence. Bangladesh, lying on a flat delta, faces enormous risk with even a small loss in elevation. And in the United States, places like Louisiana and California are experiencing the dangerous mix of groundwater extraction, land compaction, and earthquake threats, all right near crucial ports and coastal infrastructure. One might ask, why aren't these warning signs enough to spur major action? The unsettling truth is that many of these dangers build slowly, in the background, until the moment they don't, and then it's too late. That's where Vanga's eerie line hits home again. No enemy, no warning, just silence. And what about the recent data out of Turkey? Mid-2025 seismic readings around the southern Turkish coast and Caspian region have sparked quiet debate among geologists. This area, laced with fault lines and long periods of stillness, has some researchers asking whether we're seeing the early signs of a deeper shift, an ominous silence before sudden movement. While this theory hasn't reached full consensus, it adds yet another piece to the puzzle, suggesting that even the places that seem calm may be carrying hidden stress. So, what do we take away from all this? The truth is, we're not talking about predicting doomsday or fear-mongering. We're talking about understanding and translating ancient warnings into modern awareness. Baba Vanga's prophecy, once seen as pure mysticism, now echoes the very language of environmental science and geology. She described a failure that begins from below, affects major cities and port capitals, and is ignored until it's too late. Doesn't that sound uncomfortably familiar? The big question isn't, is the prophecy real? But rather, are we listening to the world beneath our feet? So, here's the message we need to take to heart. Silence isn't safety. Just because disaster doesn't scream at us doesn't mean it's not on the way. Are we willing to recognize the signs before the map is redrawn overnight? Are we prepared to act on quiet warnings rather than waiting for the loud consequences? The lesson here isn't just about prophecy, it's about humility, awareness, and responsibility. Pay attention to the earth, to the science, and to the stillness, because sometimes what's most dangerous is what we choose to ignore. Number 3. Criteria for identifying the vanishing nation. Continuing from Baba Vanga's haunting warning and the increasingly clear scientific signals we've already discussed, we now turn to something just as critical. How do we identify the very nation that might be on the verge of disappearing silently, suddenly, and from within? It's not some remote village, but a place right in front of us, where the warning signs are already surfacing. The first sign begins deep underground, where water rises not from the sky, but from beneath our feet. As groundwater levels rise, and as pressure builds within confined aquifers, the ground itself can begin to lose its strength. What was once firm earth becomes unstable, sometimes even behaving like liquid. This process, known as liquefaction, may sound technical, but its impact is all too real, and it's becoming more common in many coastal cities. Unfortunately, human activity only makes the situation worse. Overpumping groundwater, building massive structures on soft or reclaimed land, and expanding urban zones into vulnerable delta areas all contribute to increased underground pressure. When that pressure builds faster than it can be released, the stage is quietly being set for collapse. No dramatic storm, no explosion, just the quiet crumbling of everything we thought was stable. But this is more than just a geological issue. Baba Vanga pointed directly to something larger, a symbolic image, the mouth that feeds ships. It suggests a coastal capital, a major port, or a strategic maritime hub. These places aren't just densely populated, they're deeply connected to the nation's economy, identity, and global ties. Ports that handle millions of tons of goods, cities where political power and infrastructure all cluster near the water's edge. These are the locations where even a small shift in the ground could bring massive consequences. These cities rely on tightly woven lifelines: water, energy, data, food, and transportation, most of them channeled through low-lying zones that are already at risk. And what makes it more alarming is that these risks have often been recognized, studied, and then ignored. Satellite data has shown ground sinking inch by inch. Flood levels creep higher each year. Engineers and scientists submit reports, call for reinforcements, urge investment in safety measures, but those warnings are often softened, delayed, or completely set aside. Baba Vanga's words, "Laughter is louder than the tremor beneath them," speak powerfully to this pattern. Over time, when risk becomes routine, it's easy to stop paying attention. And when leaders dismiss danger, developers push forward, and the public tunes out, The silence that follows becomes the final alarm. From a scientific perspective, experts today use very specific tools to spot these dangers. They test the underground pressure, monitor the soil's resistance to shaking, and track changes in groundwater levels. They examine how urban infrastructure is built, especially if essential systems like hospitals, ports, and power plants are sitting on land barely above sea level. And they look at the culture of governance. Have experts issued warnings that went ignored? Have safety upgrades been endlessly delayed? When all these factors combine a vulnerable location, strategic significance, and a pattern of neglect, it forms a clear picture of a place where collapse could happen quickly, quietly, and with devastating effect. In that moment, Baba Vanga's prophecy shifts from mysterious vision to urgent message. This kind of disaster isn't born only from nature, it's shaped by how we choose to respond. The silence she described isn't just a poetic metaphor, it's the sound of warning signs being buried beneath normal life. And now, the real value of her words is this: a call to awareness. To listen closely, to act before silence becomes irreversible. If you've watched up to this point, you're already one of the few ready to uncover the truth behind Baba Vanga's chilling prophecy. Comment below with Truth Seeker to show you're open to the deeper meanings hidden in her words. Don't click away, there's more to reveal that could change how you see the world. Stay until the end to understand why this prophecy is finally starting to make sense. Number 4. Candidate nations and analysis. As we move deeper into understanding Baba Vanga's striking prophecy, this next layer brings us to a critical and thought-provoking question: not just what could happen, but where such a vanishing might unfold. By examining real-world locations through the lens of 3 key criteria: instability from below, the presence of a coastal capital or strategic port, and a pattern of ignored or normalized warnings, we begin to see certain nations and regions emerge as plausible candidates. Now, this isn't about predicting doom for a specific country, but about reading the signs through the lens of environmental science and historical patterns of risk. Bangladesh, for instance, stands out not just because of its location, but because of its geological makeup. Most of the country sits mere meters above sea level on soft, waterlogged delta sediments. These are the very types of soils most vulnerable to liquefaction, especially when stressed by earthquakes or tropical cyclones. The cities of Dhaka and Chattogram are both dense, economically vital, and closely tied to river and port systems. A rapid increase in underground water pressure during a seismic event could cause embankments to fail, and even a small vertical shift could lead to devastating levels of flooding. While Bangladesh has made significant strides in building cyclone shelters and managing its rivers, the sheer scale of risk from subsidence and storm surge overlap remains dangerously high. Next, we turn to the Netherlands, a country often admired for its world-renowned engineering, yet quietly dependent on a delicate balancing act. Large portions of Dutch land lie below sea level, kept dry by an intricate system of dikes, dunes, and pumps. Rotterdam, one of the world's busiest ports, sits at the heart of this system, surrounded by densely populated polders. While the Netherlands maintains exceptional real-time water management and coastal defenses, it's precisely this tightly coupled infrastructure that introduces a narrow margin for error. A sudden failure, perhaps from a storm surge paired with an infrastructure glitch or localized subsidence, could result in a from-below flooding event, not through walls being overtopped, but through seepage, piping, or unnoticed structural cracks. Despite its resilience, the Netherlands is not immune to tail risks, especially as climate stress mounts. Shifting southeast, Indonesia offers another compelling case, especially Jakarta, a city that's become symbolic of urban vulnerability. Jakarta is sinking faster than nearly any city on Earth, driven by excessive groundwater extraction and rapid heavy development on soft alluvial ground. Add to that Indonesia's high seismic activity and the looming threat of volcanic disturbances, and the picture becomes clearer. A major quake could easily trigger liquefaction, overwhelm seawalls, and set off a chain reaction of infrastructure failures. Although the government is moving its capital inland, this transition phase may expose further vulnerabilities before solutions fully take hold. Far out in the Indian Ocean, the Maldives presents an entirely different, yet equally alarming scenario. As the world's lowest-lying nation, it doesn't need to experience dramatic collapse to become uninhabitable. Just a slight change, such as saltwater intrusion into freshwater aquifers or coral reef degradation, could render large areas unsuitable for life, forcing mass evacuation without a single building falling. While adaptation efforts like elevation projects are underway, the scale of resources required may outstrip what's available. And across the Atlantic, the United States shows signs of strain in multiple regions. In South Florida, porous limestone bedrock allows tidal waters to rise from beneath, while urban and financial centers rest dangerously close to the sea. In New Orleans and southern Louisiana, subsidence and delta compaction are ongoing threats, with critical energy and maritime assets depending on aging levee systems. Coastal California adds to the picture with large port cities built on fill, an unstable foundation when shaken by earthquakes, and the looming threat of seismic activity along major fault lines. In each of these regions, the risks don't come all at once, but layer upon one another: groundwater pressure, land subsidence, seismic activity, and fragile infrastructure. And while the US has strong engineering capabilities and emergency planning, the focus often falls on immediate events rather than the slower, deeper processes quietly increasing the danger. Overlaying all of this is an intriguing motif that emerges from the narrative, what some have called the mirror nations idea. In this reading, Baba Vanga's prophecy doesn't point to only one nation disappearing physically, but pairs it with another, unraveling from within. While one country may vanish underwater or collapse from geophysical stress, another may fracture socially or institutionally. This could look like internal division, economic breakdown, or a collapse of trust in leadership or systems. It reminds us that no crisis exists in isolation. Global economies, migration patterns, media, and even climate pressures connect nations in ways that mean one collapse often sends shockwaves far beyond its borders. The signs of these twin failures may look different, but their causes are often shared: environmental neglect, complacent governance, and the normalization of early warning signs. What this tells us is that resilience must be built on two levels: physical resilience for the places facing geophysical risk, and institutional and communal resilience for those facing social fragmentation. In the end, the thread connecting all these candidate nations isn't just location, it's pattern, a dangerous cocktail of soft, saturated ground beneath vital coastal centers, warning signs that surface gradually but are treated as background noise, and a culture often shaped by politics, economics, or habit that chooses comfort over caution. That's where Baba Vanga's message, as cryptic as it once seemed, finds startling relevance. Because when we ignore small tremors both in the earth and in society, we may not hear the final warning until it's too late. Her prophecy, viewed through today's scientific understanding, isn't a prediction of fate. It's a challenge to listen more carefully, to act with awareness, and to understand that silence, in both nature and governance, can sometimes be the loudest signal of all. Number 5. Spiritual and karmic dimensions. As we get closer to the final layer of Baba Vanga's prophecy, we begin to realize that this is not just a warning about land subsidence or the collapse of nations, but a message about something deeper: something spiritual and moral that lies beneath the surface of all the physical signs we have discovered so far. She hints at a kind of moral echo. When we take too much, too quickly, and without care, the earth returns what was unjustly taken. This isn't about divine punishment in the traditional sense, but about cause and effect, about the natural consequences of excess, ignorance, and disconnection. So, ask yourself this: what happens when a society builds its foundations on fragile ground, not just in the soil, but in its values? When cities are raised on land that was never meant to hold them, when rivers are redirected, wetlands drained, and entire coastlines artificially reshaped, there is a kind of spiritual tension built into the landscape. And when that reshaping is done in secret, rushed for profit, or carried out with disregard for the long-term impact, the damage runs deeper than the eye can see. It embeds itself into the very systems we rely on, from our infrastructure to our institutions. But this prophecy doesn't stop at one nation's fate. It speaks to a larger turning point that affects us all. The idea of a vanishing nation becomes not only a physical disaster, but a global interruption, a moment that forces everyone to stop, reflect, and reevaluate what truly makes a country strong and secure. Is it just military power and economic wealth? Or is it something more quiet and lasting: humility, care for the land, honesty in leadership, and a commitment to listen before it's too late? The shock of losing a nation, whether to water, fire, or internal collapse, shakes more than borders. It shakes our assumptions, and it invites a response. Will the world respond with denial, distraction, and competition, or will we choose restoration, shared responsibility, and wiser leadership? This leads us to what the prophecy calls the three losses, a sequence unfolding between 2025 and 2032. First, a nation disappears beneath the sea. This is the most visible, the most literal, and a reminder that nature has limits. When we push too far, when infrastructure is built without true integrity, it eventually fails. Second, another nation doesn't sink but burns from within. Civil collapse, trust lost, truth fractured, and people divided. In this stage, the threat isn't water, it's the erosion of civic values. Just like a levee breaking from years of neglect, a society that stops caring for truth and fairness can fall apart overnight. The third nation doesn't collapse physically or politically, but spiritually. It enters what Vanga called a spiritual war, a deep confusion about meaning, identity, and purpose. In this stage, people can no longer work together because they no longer agree on what is real, what is worth preserving, or why they belong to each other at all. Through all of this, one powerful lesson stands out. These aren't just different disasters, they're symptoms of the same root problem. When we trade long-term integrity for short-term gain, whether in the environment, in our politics, or in our shared culture, we plant the seeds of collapse. That's what the karmic reading of this prophecy asks us to see, not to fear the earth, but to respect it, not to idolize strength, but to seek balance. It challenges us to shift from spectacle to responsibility, from denial to preparation. We are urged to restore the land and the values that help us listen to warning signs instead of silencing them. True security, in this view, doesn't come from bigger walls or louder declarations, but from humility, the courage to treat both scientific data and spiritual insight as guides, not as inconveniences. So what can we take away from this? That reckoning doesn't come out of nowhere. It follows choices made every day. And if collapse can trace its roots back to neglect, then healing must start with awareness, honesty, and unity. Because whether the ground crumbles, the system breaks, or the spirit fades, it all begins with what we choose to value. The prophecy ends not with a curse, but with a choice. Will we listen sooner, act more wisely, and stand together when it matters most? You've just scratched the surface of Baba Vanga's mysterious vision. Want to dive deeper into the truth? Type "I believe in signs" in the comments to let us know you're ready for more. Don't miss what's coming next. The final part could leave you speechless. Number 6. Imminent signs. As we follow the unfolding layers of Baba Vanga's prophecy, the final piece that brings it chillingly close to the present day lies in what many overlook: the subtle signs. These aren't the dramatic scenes we usually associate with disaster. They are soft, strange signals that are easy to dismiss, yet together form a pattern we can no longer afford to ignore. One of the most overlooked signs is the recent reports of sudden booms along coastlines, loud, unexplained sounds that some brush off as minor quakes, offshore activity, or even atmospheric noise. But when scientists look deeper, they point to possible stress fractures beneath the seabed, gas pockets escaping under pressure, or reef shelf failures quietly shifting under strain. The key here is that these events don't begin with a storm or a warhead. They start from beneath, with pressure rising through the earth and water, unnoticed until it's too late. That's the eerie brilliance of Baba Vanga's message. The real threat doesn't come from above, it rises quietly from below. And right alongside these mystery booms, we've seen anomalies in ocean behavior: tides that behave oddly, beaches where the water recedes or surges without any storm or wind to explain it, and slack tides that arrive out of sync with the moon or weather. In other words, the ocean's rhythm, the very heartbeat of the coast, is skipping. Something under the surface is interfering with the natural patterns, and when the sea starts to drift out of harmony with the sky, it's a signal worth noticing. Adding to this is an unsettling trend recorded by marine sensors: unusual heat rising from the ocean floor. These aren't seasonal temperature changes, but thermal surges and underwater heat plumes that suggest volcanic activity, rising pore pressures, or fluid movement through soft sediment layers. On the surface, everything might appear calm and normal, but beneath the ocean floor could be quietly shifting state. Baba Vanga's prophecy never relied on visible spectacle, and that's what makes this part so disturbing. Danger builds invisibly, under our feet and below the waterline, while daily life goes on as if nothing's wrong. In fact, she alluded to this shift in perception with the cryptic phrase, "The sand falls differently." It may sound poetic, but it captures something deeply human: how our sense of time and urgency distorts just before a major crisis. Days begin to feel rushed, warnings seem abstract, and routine feels safer than acting on unsettling truths. People know something's off, but they cling to normalcy, hoping things will reset on their own. This is how we end up living a normal life at the edge of failure. Lights stay on, traffic flows, news channels talk about everything except the subtle signs building beneath us. And because there's no official panic, people laugh, scroll, and carry on. That's the line again: laughter is louder than the tremor. It's not that no one saw it coming, it's that no one wanted to believe it was coming. What makes all these signs so dangerous is their subtlety. Each one alone can be rationalized: a strange noise, a rogue wave, an off tide, a warm patch of water. But when you string them together, a very clear picture begins to form: a build-up of energy and stress beneath a coastal region where no one's paying attention because nothing has officially gone wrong yet. The final irony and the most sobering part of Baba Vanga's prophecy is that the real warning may be silence itself. When systems don't scream, when danger whispers, we often dismiss it. And that's when we're most vulnerable, not because we weren't warned, but because the warnings didn't match what we expected disaster to look like. So what can we learn from this? That listening means more than hearing sirens. It means paying attention to patterns, to shifts, to the quiet things we usually ignore. True awareness starts with humility, the understanding that nature doesn't always give us dramatic cues, and that resilience means acting before confirmation, not after collapse. The earth speaks softly before it moves violently. Are we paying attention to the quiet? Number 7. Global consequences. As we arrive at the final and most sobering part of Baba Vanga's prophecy, the scale shifts from local devastation to a global reckoning, a moment that tests not just governments and borders, but the very moral fabric of our modern world. When a nation vanishes overnight, as her vision suggests, the first shock won't just be the crumbling of land, it will be the sudden freezing of global systems. Trade routes that once moved quietly across the sea grind to a halt. Deep-sea cables connecting economies are severed, and ports' lifelines of many nations shut down without warning. Markets panic, insurers retreat, and world leaders take to the airwaves not with threats of war, but with pledges of humanitarian aid, even as uncertainty floods the air. In this moment of silence, people don't just lose homes, they lose context. Rumors grow faster than facts, and in the absence of clarity, institutions strain under the weight of distrust. As the Buddha once said, 3 things cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. But in a global crisis, where truth is buried under politics and panic, even the most stable societies begin to wobble. The fallout doesn't stop at broken supply chains. In the blink of an eye, millions are displaced, forced to flee a place that no longer exists on a map. Neighboring countries suddenly face overwhelming demands, housing shortages, strained water systems, job markets bursting at the seams. Immigration policies tighten. Naval patrols blur the line between rescuers and gatekeepers. And for those who escape with nothing but their lives, the cruelest twist awaits: statelessness. When your passport represents a country that no longer exists, where do you belong? Who claims you, and who pays your debts or honors your rights? Legal frameworks begin to fail. Insurance claims stall. Public debt becomes a ghost number, and ownership of homes, of heritage, of place floats in limbo. It's not just a legal crisis, it's an identity crisis. Children will ask what name went there, the text says, and those children will face a world unsure of how to answer. Will maps erase the name? Will history move on? Or will those in power decide what is remembered and what is forgotten? These are more than political decisions, they are decisions of memory. And memory, as the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh once taught, is a form of practice. To forget is not always an accident. Sometimes it is an act of neglect. From here, the consequences deepen. With no bodies to bury and no rituals to perform, communities begin to fracture under the weight of unprocessed grief. Time starts to feel strange, compressed, hollow. Distrust brews, conspiracy fills the void, and the legitimacy of experts hinges entirely on whether early warnings were spoken clearly or ignored altogether. Some people turn inward, isolating and radicalizing, while others reach out and mobilize. Populism feeds on fear, and a deep divide grows between those who want to rebuild and those who want someone to blame. Meanwhile, the world's security dynamics shift under the cover of humanitarian response. Borders militarize, piracy and coastal crime surge where law has gone thin. International treaties, built in more peaceful times, are suddenly tested in real time, and not all of them hold. And then comes the domino effect. The collapse of one coastal nation triggers fear in others. Capital investment dries up in at-risk deltas around the world. Insurers pull out of coastal zones. Credit ratings sink, and trust in institutions begins to slide. In one mirror nation, the political cracks widen into fractures. As the pressure mounts, the story becomes not just about physical loss, but about a spiritual unraveling, a battle not over land, but over meaning itself. This is what Baba Vanga hinted at all along. The collapse that begins in the earth may end in the soul. As the philosopher Lao Tzu warned, if you do not change direction, you may end up where you are heading. And if that direction is denial, disconnection, and delay, the damage won't be confined to one nation, it will echo globally. So what can we do? The answer is neither panic nor passivity, but preparation. We must begin by recognizing the legal identity of nations that lose their land, ensuring their people retain diplomatic rights, citizenship, and voice. We must build resilience not just in seawalls and infrastructure, but in the hearts of institutions, in truth-telling, and in trust-building. Mobility pathways must be created not just to move people, but to carry dignity with them. Insurance, debt, and aid must be tied to fairness and future thinking. And above all, we must protect memory, preserve the languages, stories, sacred places, and cultural truths that can outlive borders. Because the disappearance of one nation is not a footnote in history, it's a message to all of us that the ground we stand on, physically and morally, must be cared for. As Baba Vanga's prophecy reminds us, and as Buddhist wisdom echoes, if we listen with awareness, we can change the ending. But if we continue as we are trading depth for speed, ignoring soft warnings, and treating crisis as someone else's problem, the first flag to fall may be just the beginning. The true test is not what collapses, but how we choose to respond. As we've explored tonight, Baba Vanga's prophecy is not just about a vanishing nation. It's a mirror held up to our world, one that reflects not just environmental cracks, but moral ones. The silence she warned of may already be here, woven into ignored data, postponed decisions, and a dangerous sense of normalcy. But this doesn't have to be a tale of fear. It can be a call to awareness. Because if we listen, truly listen, both to the earth and to the quiet wisdom in ourselves, then perhaps the prophecy doesn't end in collapse, but in awakening. Thank you for joining the journey of wisdom. If this message resonated with you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss our upcoming videos. Together, we can stay mindful, stay curious, and most importantly, stay awake to the deeper truths unfolding around us. Until next time, walk gently and listen closely. The ground is always speaking.